So, Jeff Halper, is Israel is about to collapse?
No, I don't think Israel's about to collapse. Hopefully, if we work right politically, we can make it unsustainable. And the apartheid system will collapse to be replaced, as we'll talk about tonight or today, by one democratic state. That's the political plan that I support. But in terms of Israel collapsing, because of economic reasons and so on, I don't accept that. Ilan Pappé is coming out with a new book now that's called The End of Zionism. And, that's his contention, that hundreds of thousands of Israelis are leaving the country, which is not the case. That the Israeli economy is in a crisis, which is not really the case. It has its issues, but it's far from being in a state of collapse. That Israel is becoming a pariah state, which is true on many levels, especially in international public opinion, but far from that in the halls of government. So I don't think it's wishful thinking. But again, I think the real issue has to be, like it was with South Africa, working through BDS and boycotts and all kinds of other ways in making the apartheid regime that Israel has become unsustainable and making that collapse and replacing it by something better, but it's not going to collapse on its own accord.
What does unsustainable mean? What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is genuinely creating a condition in which Israel is an apartheid regime. It's not about to be, there's no danger it's going to become. It is an apartheid regime. The UN says that, Amnesty says that with detailed documentation, international law says that. And it's an apartheid regime that's engaged in genocide. And so that kind of regime has no international legitimacy, not politically and not legally. And it should be made unsustainable, meaning that it should be excluded from all international forums. There should not be normal diplomatic relations with that kind of a country, like there weren't with South Africa in the end. That corporations should pull out of Israel and not cooperate with this apartheid regime, and that in the end, it simply has to be forced to end its apartheid regime and become something new. South Africa was transformed from an apartheid regime to a democratic country, and that's what I look for. Israel has to be transformed from an apartheid regime, which means a Jewish country as well, because, in an apartheid regime, a country belongs to a particular people, from an apartheid regime into a democratic state of all its citizens.
How do you get from apartheid regime to a democratic state?
Well, it's not easy. The first thing you need is a political program. And that, has been an issue for a long time because, the Palestinians were kind of tricked. The Palestinians began with an anti-colonial political program, even in the mandate period, but certainly in the early days of the PLO, this was an anti-colonial struggle, like the other anti-colonial struggles of the 40s and 50s and 60s and so on. But by the end of the 1980s, they were tricked by the United States in particular to say, if you adopt a two-state solution, if you abandon the anti-colonial struggle and negotiate with Israel, you'll have a Palestinian state, maybe a truncated little state, but you'll have something. And Arafat, I think, more than the PLO itself, was tricked into doing that. And it was a trick, because as we know in Oslo, the two-state solution was never, ever even referred to. It was not a term of reference of the Oslo. Rather, there was simply 7 years of open-ended negotiations to nothing, in which there were no constraints in Israeli settlements. So Israel continued to settle. So in 1993, when Oslo began, there were 200,000 settlers. In 2000, when it ended, there were 400,000 settlers. Today, there's almost 800,000 settlers. And so the two-state solution was a cynical ploy on the part of the United States and Israel. And so the Palestinians have paid the price. Now, it's taken them a while. All right, now where do we go from there? And I think it's taken them a while. I think now there's beginning to be, and of course, part of Oslo was putting into place a collaborationist regime. Think about this. Israel and the United States captured the Palestinian liberation movement. They got Arafat at the very beginning of the Palestinian Authority to dismantle the PLO, the only political vehicle the Palestinians had that was a hub that united all the scattered fragments of the Palestinian people, was dismantled. And in its place was a collaborationist regime. Arafat, and more so Abu Mazen until today, is simply a subcontractor for the Israeli occupation. And so now you've got an additional problem. You know, your own liberation organization has been co-opted by the oppressor. You know, it's like Mandela was working for de Klerk. That's the situation. And so there's two things. Well, let me just say one thing. There's two things that have to happen. One is there has to be a political program. And that's a program we've been working on. We'll talk about it today, called the One Democratic State Program. I think that's the only other way to go. And the other thing is that there has to be a revival of some kind of political vehicle, be it the PLO, and there are attempts to try to revive the PLO, but Abu Mazen is against it, although he's the chairman, or some other political vehicle, maybe from the grassroots, that has to emerge. So those are the two agenda items that, if they're in place, if there is a Palestinian leadership and political vehicle and a political program around the one state, I think it can garner the support among the peoples of the world and among governments that could cause the collapse of the Israeli regime and its replacement.
Okay, so I didn't really get an understanding how would the apartheid regime collapse. What is the program to collapse the apartheid Israeli regime?
Well, it's like I said, you isolate it, you boycott it, you make it a pariah state, you try to enforce international law that sanctions it. Apartheid is illegal in international law. I mean, there is a law against the crime of apartheid. So there's a problem of enforcement. It's not really it's not an issue to be discussed. Can there be an legitimate apartheid regime? And then, you know, so using all those instruments, you still have the problem, of course, that yes, Israel is supported by governments, and particularly the United States government. But at the same time, you know, with South Africa, and I think that is happening here. You know, corporations didn't want to be soiled by being associated with that apartheid regime. When Ford Motor Company pulled out, that was a huge thing in South Africa. I mean, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I'm looking at how South Africa was, in fact, a strong apartheid regime, a white regime that was supported by Europe, supported by the United States, with a strong army and a strong how that was made unsustainable. And I think that could be replicated today. I think Israel is even more vulnerable than the apartheid regime was in South Africa.
Well, with two differences. South Africa is not a Jewish state, was not a Jewish state, was not built after the Holocaust to the white people, and also did not have the same military clout and did not have nuclear weapons, and did not have the white people were the minority by far, and the black people did not want a state of their own.
No, look, there's differences, and I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities to Israel, and there are strengths, like you're saying, but I think it's doable. But I would rather actually move on to really deal more with what would be the solution, or what are the political programs, or where could we be going, than to get in. I mean, we might disagree, but I do think that it is possible to make this regime unsustainable to a point where the world would be open. But the point is not, you can't collapse it by itself. There has to be, where are you going with it? And I think if the international community is convinced that where we're going is better for the Jews in Israel, not only a win-win for everybody, a democracy, equal rights for everyone, return of the refugees, good economy, everybody lives and works wherever they want to. If they could be convinced that this replacement is not only more just, but also more doable and more equitable and good for the Jews, in fact, then I think the collapse is made much easier. The collapse doesn't come in a vacuum. It comes as a precondition for a much better future for all the peoples in Palestine, Israel.
All right, but let me ask you before we get to the one democratic state program that you want to talk about. In order to get there, do we need Palestinians and Israelis together having the same vision together, or does it have to be Palestinians alone and Israelis alone somehow creating a democratic state?
There is no shared vision. And I mean, there are a few people like me who are anti-Zionist. I can count on my fingers how many of my compatriots there are. There aren't that many. And this is where we have to start, you'll see. I think any political discussion, you know, the diagnosis is important. There's 100 solutions out there. There's my solution of one state. There's a one Palestine. Is it now one Palestinian state, one civil state? Is it one Islamic state like Hamas wants? Is it two states? Is it a confederation? Is it a federation? Is it a canton system? I mean, there's 1,000 solutions out there. But it's like if you have a pain in your chest and you go to the doctor. I mean, the doctor has 100 medicines on the shelf. He doesn't just pick out the medicine that he likes the most. First of all, he says, well, what's the problem here? Is it heartburn? And I'll give you an antacid pill. Or is it a stroke and you have to have open heart surgery now? So the diagnosis determines what medicine you pull off the shelf. The diagnosis here determines what the solution is politically. And the diagnosis is that Zionism is settler colonialism. It's a settler colonial project, and it has been explicitly for the last 130 years that the Zionists came to Palestine with the intention of taking it over, of taking its land, displacing its people, replacing them with Jews, transforming an Arab state into a Jewish state, and genocide was built into it. You can't do all that without genocide. That remains overwhelmingly the Israeli direction today. And in fact, we're getting towards the culmination of this project in what Biden and Trump call normalization. So that's now, if that's the diagnosis, that you have one, there aren't two sides here. There aren't two sides. There's one side that's a colonial invading side that wants to clear the country of the other population and remake the country. And there's an indigenous people that are fighting for their existence. You can't compare colonial violence with indigenous resistance. So there is no shared vision here. Israel doesn't pretend the vision of it, the reality of Israel, the legal reality of
But
Israel
I'm speaking about
is
your vision.
it's a Jewish state. It's a Jewish state in the best of days on 78% of Palestine, which makes this rump Palestinian state anyway unviable and non-sovereign. But in reality, of overall of Palestine today, you have 800,000 settlers in the West Bank. So that this is the purpose. And if we take that into account, now let's talk about what solution flows out of that situation.
Yeah, okay, but
That's what we have to talk
I don't
about.
think you understood my question. My question is, in order to get to that solution that you think is,
I understood your question. The whites of South Africa would never have agreed to the dismantling of the apartheid regime. Why would they? Why would the Jews want to dismantle this regime where they have all the land, all the resources, all the political power, all the economic power? Why? What interest would they have in dismantling that? You
so
see, and
isn't
that
isn't
is
that
exactly the answer to your question. There is not only is there no shared vision, there's no shared interest here.
okay? So isn't your
By the way, one more, and then put into that security, where the Israelis, even if they were thinking about maybe some kind of a peace, I mean, their whole idea is the Arabs are all terrorists. They just want to kill us, which they hear every single day. So put that into the pot as well. That not only is there no motivation to dismantle apartheid, but why would we make ourselves vulnerable to a terrorist population that would then take over because they would have the majority? Why would we do that?
okay? So everything you're telling me sounds like contradiction to your vision,
Hmm.
because you're saying, why would the Jews want to do it? They are the powerful people. They have no interest of doing it. They are they are afraid of the Palestinians,
That's
and
right.
yet they will dismantle the
No,
apartheid state. So you're saying they will not dismantle it, someone else will dismantle it for them.
that's right. We have to. We, meaning the peoples of the world, mobilizing our governments. We have to do it. In South Africa, again, just to, you know, Mandela didn't knock on the doors of all the white people and try to explain to them why apartheid should be. Martin Luther King didn't knock on the doors of all the people of Alabama to convince them that black people are really okay and there should be equality. It doesn't work that way. First, you change the political system and the power structures and everything else, and then the people begin to fall into place afterwards. So that in this situation, forget the Israelis. The Israelis are never going to be a partner in dismantling their own regime. And so we have to have a political program that's articulated by and supported by a critical mass of Palestinians that we then take to the international community, to all the millions of people that are marching all over the world, but that don't have as yet a political program to advocate for, and then let them go to their governments. And I think the wind is in our sails for doing that. I think Israel has lost it in the court of public opinion. And then you do what South Africa did. You make the apartheid regime unsustainable, and then with a new constitution, everything transparent, you then initiate a transition, internationally supported transition to a democracy. And then the Israelis, with no choice, have to do that. They'll have to go into this transition. And once they're in the transition, then I think they'll discover that actually this is a good thing for them. It's true, there's no Jewish state anymore. There's a new civil state that replaces it, but they have equal rights and everything that we've talked about. And so the Israelis will never be partners, and they're going to have to be forced into this transition.
Now, the Palestinians also have regimes, don't they?
No, they don't have anything.
Well, they have
What
civil
Palestinian regime
society, they
exists?
have a government, not elected government, but
No,
someone is running.
It's a Bantustan. Israel's running it through, South Africa had its Bantustans. Every Bantustan had a president, a king, a chief. I mean, that's all, just
But those will
cosmetic.
have to be
Israel runs.
dismantled as
That's right. That's
all
right,
right.
because there's only one government now of
Okay. Now,
everybody.
assuming that everything you said is achieved, and what's going to be the new country? What is that going to be?
The new country will be a civil state, a democratic state with a constitution and no tricks, no cantons, double citizenships, this, that, power sharing, all that kind of stuff
Yeah,
that is
I
only intended to preserve Jewish supremacy. No, transparent. One state, one government, one parliament, one legal system, one voting system, equal rights. Everybody lives wherever they want to, which means that the settlers can stay in Hebron if they want to. Nobody's going to throw them out. But Hebron stops being a settlement, that part of Hebron and so on. And that's that.
secular,
It's a civil state. I don't know.
secular,
Well, in our view, it's not secular because the vast majority of Palestinians and the majority of Israelis are not secular. They're
right? And
religious, they're
separation
traditional.
between government and church.
Separation of church and state, non-sectarian is the
Yeah.
way we call it.
Okay.
Now the question is, and there is a real issue here, is it going to be what the Palestinians, because they want liberation, right? I mean, that they have a double struggle. One is for their liberation and then for whatever comes in the future. Our struggle, and we already have a state, our struggle is for the future. And so the question is going to be, is it going to be a Palestinian state, right? of equal rights for all its citizens, but Israeli Jews become Palestinian Jews, citizens of Palestine, or, and this is the option I prefer, a civil state, maybe with a new name even, that belongs to all its citizens, in which you have cultural self-determination for Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews, but within the framework of the single common civil state.
Has the constitution for that state been written?
No, that's a project. We're not at that stage yet.
Why
It's a
not?
very difficult process because, the Palestinians, you know, are in a much more difficult situation than the blacks were in South Africa. Mandela used to talk about that. The ANC, for all he was in jail for 28 years, but he was able to function in jail as a leader of the ANC. Their leadership, there were assassinations, but for the most part, their leadership was intact. The ANC was able to function and so on. Palestinians and all the black Africans were in South Africa. Here, the Palestinians have been scattered all over the place by the international community and by Israel. Half the Palestinians are refugees. The Palestinians, even inside in Gaza, they can't talk to the people they can't talk at all anymore, but they can't talk to the people of the West Bank. The southern West Bank can't talk to the northern West Bank or meet, really. The West Bank is disconnected from inside Israel, which is disconnected from Lebanon, which is disconnected from Syria and Jordan, all disconnected from the diaspora, so that they don't even know each other to a large degree. There's been 70 years of scattering and fragmenting. And then you've got all the different political factions and the religious factions and so on. And that was the role of the PLO, was to keep it together. The PLO was the authority. They were the ones, they had elections to the Palestinian National Council. It was representative. They were in touch with all the different fragments of the Palestinian people. And they had the authority to determine political programs, to make political decisions. All that is gone. So now the Palestinians have to try to overcome all of that, plus the fact that they're going to be repressed. The minute somebody stands up and tries to organize that, a Palestinian, they're going to get killed by the Palestinian Authority itself. And if the PA misses, they're going to get knocked off by Israel. People ask, where's the Palestinian Mandela? I tell you, the Palestinian Mandela is either dead or in prison. That's where he or she is. And so you can't underestimate the difficulties the Palestinians have and are going to have in trying to get together behind a political program that they can bring forward. That's a real struggle, and that's something that I'm trying to work with them on. And there are attempts, but you can't begin to fathom the amount of suppression and violence against them that exists all over, culminating, of course, in the genocide in Gaza.
So why are you not writing the Constitution?
Well, I'm part of the group. I mean, we do have Israeli Jews that are involved, but I'm not a Palestinian. I mean, there's two levels in terms of the
But
Palestinian
it's a one
struggle.
country. Why do you have to be Palestinian? Why can't you just write a constitution, whether you are a Palestinian or Israeli? It makes no
No,
difference.
you can. No, but it has to be a joint procedure. In other words, Palestinians are again in two struggles: for liberation and then for whatever political future that they want, which I think is one state. So that I'm not part of their liberation struggle. They have to say, what are our essential needs? What do we need, even in one state, living with Israelis? Fine. But what do we need essentially that ensures our rights and our liberation? We need the refugees to come back, for example. We have to have that. We have to have some kind of self-determination. We have to have some kind of apologies, reconciliation, land redistribution. All that has to go into this. And then you get to a point now together, once they've defined what their goals are, what their parameters are, then we sit down together and begin to write the Constitution. And certainly Israeli Jews have to be a part of that process. That's the joint. But to get to that process, you've got to have that Palestinian input that we don't have yet.
So, Jeff, our organization wrote the Constitution for a common federal government. And
Yes.
I think you read the Constitution. What's
This
wrong
isn't
with
the
it?
first time we're talking.
I'm sorry?
This isn't the first time we're talking.
Correct. And I am trying to see, why are you not a strong supporter of the federal government that we are proposing? Because it has a constitution. It does not require the collapse of the apartheid regime.
That's right. That's the problem.
It is creating a government. Now, it can have an election very, very soon.
Right. That's
Why
right.
are intellectuals like you not supporting this kind of vision? Why are you waiting for something to happen in the future that, with all due respect, you're not even able to articulate what the constitution of the future country will be?
No,
And
I
here
can
you have
articulate very well. We have a 10-point. No, we have a 10-point political program. I can articulate very well. If we haven't gotten there yet in our discussion. But you're suggesting, because I'll tell you why. Because in my view, you're suggesting a medicine that is a very good medicine. I have no problem with the concept. I have no problem with your vision. I have no problem with the Constitution. From my point of view, it's not the right medicine on the shelf for the disease that we're talking about. It does not, as you said,
why not?
it does not end the apartheid regime.
What makes it the wrong medication for the
Okay.
disease that the Israelis and the Palestinians are suffering?
All right. Let me just really quick, just in a half a minute. These are the major tasks, let's say, that any just and workable solution has to address. And let's see how your federal plan addresses it. Let me just go over them really quick.
One by one.
Well,
one by one.
I don't know if we do one by one.
I'm not going to be able to respond to all 10.
No, but you could hear them as one thing, and then we can have, okay, one by one. And this is the basic problem that I have with the federal
let's
plan.
start with point number one.
Number one, does it thoroughly decolonize the Zionist settler colonial project by dismantling all colonial structures of domination and control? And the answer in your plan is no.
That's the thing. You fail to understand what the plan is. The plan
You
is
fail to understand what the disease is.
No. I agree with you that the disease is a Jewish state.
Colonial Jewish state. Not just a Jew.
Let me you mentioned earlier this doctor that has all these medicine on his shelves. Okay, so let's say you are a overweight person, that you suffer from diabetes, and you
Let's
go
not get
to
personal here. Hypothetically.
And you go to this doctor, and he says to you, well, you need a surgery. And you say, fine, I'll have the surgery. When can I have it? Well, we don't have a hospital. We can't have the surgery for you in the foreseeable future. Then you go to the second doctor, and he says, well, you don't need surgery, you need medicine. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you say, fine. But then your wife comes to you and says, Jeff, while you're waiting for a surgery, while you're taking medication, why don't you just exercise and eat well? And your response is, I don't want to eat well or exercise because the disease requires surgery or requires medication. What I am saying is, you can fight all these issues by eating well and exercising. So what I am saying is, you don't have to have a complete annihilation of the disease in order to practice good health.
No, but in the end, if you don't have the operation, you're going to die. So my
No,
wife's idea
no.
of
At the end, if you
exercise
don't have
is
the
great.
operation,
No, wait a
you
minute.
may
Your
not need the
medicine is great.
operation.
Your
That's the
medicine
point.
is great as a stopgap. But in the end, it is not the solution to the problem. The solution is the
It
operation.
could be the solution to the problem.
No,
That's the point.
doctor is saying in the meantime the medicine. I mean, you can have a doctor saying there's another medicine. That's what you're saying.
But I am
I'm
talking
saying
about.
no.
I
I'm
am
saying
talking
in the
about.
end you've got to have the operation, which is one democratic state. There's
Okay,
no other way.
I'm not arguing with you that that's the end result. The
Now the other
question is, can you get to that end result by just waiting
No, you're
for
not waiting. You're struggling. There's a political struggle.
what
It's
is the
not like
struggle?
we're waiting. There's a political struggle, and everything I've described is a part of the struggle. It takes time, of course, but in the meantime, you don't put in place structures that reinforce the apartheid regime.
No, that's the opposite.
Federalization recognizes two sides, and there aren't two sides. Once you make a settler colonial movement, which is unjust and immoral and illegal, aside, and you give it a state or a part of a federation, and you give it power, and you give it everything else, given the supremacy anyway that Israelis have, you're simply reinforcing that regime. And the minute you take the indigenous population that's struggling for its survival under a genocide regime, and you say, well, you're just a side, you're just half the issue here, and you've got, and you don't dismantle the power differentials and the structural power differentials like the economy and the land and political power and military power, then that medicine is basically going to kill you.
All right,
It's not a
I am
transition to
talking
the
about.
operation.
I am talking about eating well and exercising. You are saying don't eat well, don't
No,
exercise until we have the surgery.
why? I support BDS. I'm the head of the Israeli Committee Against
But you are
House
not
Demolitions. I
supporting a
fight house
federal.
demolitions.
But you are not supporting a federal. Wait, wait, wait.
I just came from a speaking tour
I'm
in the
not speaking
UK.
about
I'm
BDS.
doing
You are.
all the exercise and all the good eating on the way. Everything we have to do to keep this issue alive and to move it forward. But
Look,
it's a process.
look. We have a constitution that you agree with. You have a system
No, I
of.
don't agree with it. I don't agree with it
What's wrong with the constitution?
because it's based on federalism. And federalism is simply
It's
reinforcing the idea that
the
there are
constitution.
somehow two equal sides that are going
Okay.
to.
So the only thing you
How does
disagree.
your
Wait,
federalism
wait.
decolonize settler colonialism? That's the question that we asked. That was the first question.
Isn't there a federal government in the United States?
Yeah, the United States is still a settler colonial
Okay,
regime.
you are
Yes,
part of the
Native
United
American.
States. You hold a United States passport. You
But the
participate in
clerk,
the.
the clerk came to Mandela in prison with exactly your idea. Let's do power sharing. Let's have a
No,
federal
that's not my
government of
idea. That's not.
let's have a
You're
white
refuting.
parliament, a
No,
black
no, that.
parliament, a colored parliament. And Mandela said, no, one person, one vote. That's it. And you
Okay,
could say to Mandela, he should have compromised. If he would have compromised on the way, like you're
but
suggesting,
you're
he'll have power
representing,
sharing with the white control.
misrepresenting what I am saying. You are misrepresenting the IPC. We are not talking about power sharing. We are talking about the only legitimate government in Israel Palestine being elected right now and dealing with the existing reality of the government of Israel and the Palestinian government. Your approach is to say, I don't want to deal with the existing reality. I want to wait until it collapses. That's also an that is dealing with the existing reality by waiting for it to collapse.
But your basic assumption is that Israeli Jews who support a genocidal apartheid regime and aggressively want to take over all of Palestine are somehow going to change and have an epiphany and decide, you know what, after we've conquered the country and settled the country and controlled the country and have normalized it with the international community, you know what? Maybe we really should live with the Palestinians, and maybe we really should have a federal government and share power and have this and have that. You know,
That's not. That's
you're
you,
assuming a good faith,
you are
a good
making up
faith
the
and
my basic
willingness on the
assumption.
part of settlers that does not exist.
You are misrepresenting my basic
Okay.
assumptions. The basic assumption is that the Israelis are not a monolithic society. Okay, they
On
have
this
not.
case, they are monolithic. 94% of Israelis supported the invasion of Gaza. 4%.
Okay, but that's not the case we are talking about. We are talking about a federal government. If they are given the option to vote for a federal government, they will not be a monolithic society
Why would they do that? Why would they vote for a federal
because
government
they
to make them be
because
the only government? Why would they
because
vote for a federal government? What's their interest in doing that?
in order to have peace, in order to avoid the constant violence that they are themselves suffering, in order to have their children and their grandchildren and their parents stop going into the military, and in order to have normal life.
Well, if I was a normal Israeli and not who I am, I would say, "What are you talking about? You want me to make peace by giving power and recognizing the terrorists that want to kill
But
me
that's not,
and drive me
no,
out of the country? What are
that's
you
not what we
talking
are
about?"
speaking about.
But that's what Israelis think.
Okay, so those will not vote in the
But
election
those
for
are
a federal government.
94% of the people you're talking about. What's the
You
point
don't
of
know
a
that.
federal system where 6% of the Israelis
You
vote?
don't know it's 94%. That
No.
idea has never been presented to them. That idea has never been presented to them. A possible election for a federal government has never been presented to them.
Yeah.
And you're
And why?
refusing
And why? Because they
good
would laugh it
question.
out of the room. That's why. They just like they would
Okay.
laugh the one
Okay.
Democratic state out of the room. I'm not saying that mine is more acceptable than yours. Yours is probably more acceptable to most Israelis. But the Israelis would never ever go there. Why?
Well,
And again,
look,
the
Israelis are
why
not
would
a monolithic society.
it is
You know,
monolithic. In that sense, it's very monolithic.
but you don't know about that sense. That sense has never, that issue has never been presented to them. The only
Yes,
issue
you
that
don't have
has,
support for a two-state solution today, in which is better than federalization. You have a real Israel with its own government and a little rump Palestinian state. The Labor Party is gone. It's not
I
even in the
agree with you.
parliament anymore. You have a right-wing Israeli public that rejects even the two-state idea, let alone federalism.
All right, look,
You know,
the two
where would
state
this come
that
from?
you are
It
comparing
has
it
to
to.
be, I would say a solution has to be imposed on the Israelis. They're not going to willingly go there, you'll see. I wish they would, but they're not going to.
Well, the election will take part whether or not they want it or not, whether or not the Israeli government agree to it or not. We
Not the
can have.
government, the
I'm
people.
sorry.
Forget the government, that they'll never agree.
I'm
But the
saying
people aren't
whether or
going to
not the
agree either.
government would want it or whether or not the people. I mean, anytime you create a federal government or a democracy, you put that you create that an election. Look, the way I see it, you have a vision that is very, very ambitious, to say the least, and very remote. The first part of it, it requires the collapse of the Israeli
Apartheid
apartheid
regime.
regime,
That's right.
and the second, which you have no way of knowing that if at all it's going to happen, given the constellation of the
Okay.
idea of a Jewish state.
What do you want to
Everything.
do? Build on an apartheid regime?
I'm sorry.
You want to take the apartheid reality and build on it?
No, I want to make the Zionist idea irrelevant. And the way to make it irrelevant is to have a election for a federal government right now and to show the people of Palestine and Israel that they can sit together and vote on issues and resolve issues regardless of their governments, because if we sit together, we can resolve issues.
But Israelis are Zionists. They're
Right.
militant Zionists.
But
They don't
again,
want it to be irrelevant. They wouldn't cooperate with any kind of a political program that wants to make their own ideology, their narrative, their identity irrelevant. Why would
look,
they want to do
all
that?
the arguments you're making against the federal government
Yeah.
are doubled against your idea. They are
You
much.
sound like Trump that says, I'm going to protect women whether you want to be protected or not. I'm going to make Israelis want
No, no.
Zionism gone whether they
Look,
want it or
I
not.
am saying, look, and by the way, I'm not against your idea. I am not against your idea. I think your idea, if it happens and have one state,
Right.
terrific.
But your
But
idea prevents my idea
how?
because it doesn't flow, it doesn't lead, it doesn't decolonize, it reinforces the Israeli component
Okay.
rather than
All right. Have
weakening it
you heard of
or
the
legitimizing it. And so it becomes an obstacle between where we are today and a democratic state.
okay? Have you heard the expression that perfection is the enemy of good?
Yeah, but I don't think it applies here.
I think it
I
totally
prefer
applies.
the
Look,
expression,
your idea.
the right medicine will keep
Let's
you alive.
assume that your idea is perfect.
Okay,
All right. The
okay,
chances of it happening
right.
are, by your own discussion with me today and previously, is 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 very remote, and I'll tell you
Oh,
why.
it's not remote if you understand you're in a struggle. That's why it's called a struggle. If you have goals, if you have a program, if you have an organization and leadership and you mobilize people, which is all possible to do, I think within a fairly short period of time we could make the Israeli system collapse. It's very vulnerable even today.
And
This is not something
all of
in a
these
vacuum.
94% Israeli Zionists
That's
will
right.
agree to it.
But forget, no, you didn't listen when I was saying we forget the Israelis. We make this regime unsustainable. We make the apartheid regime collapse, which I think is extremely doable.
Okay.
There's even a campaign to get Israel expelled from the UN or suspended from the UN because
And
they're
how do
not
you
meeting
make
their
them? How do
obligations.
you forget
And
about them?
then with all of those things, you begin to move. It's a struggle. It's not easy. You're fighting hard forces, but you don't say, "Well, because it's a struggle, I'm going to go with the easy medicine."
Oh,
That
because
in the end, keeps your even makes your condition worse, so you'll never get to the operation,
I
and you're
am
going to
saying
die.
go. I am saying go with all medication, including surgery, including eating well
Don't
and
go
exercise.
together. Don't go
My
together.
my idea does not prevent your idea, but
Does
it
does
does not.
yes, because it reifies the apartheid two sides, two independent peoples kind of an idea. With an overarching thing, but it keeps intact this Israeli-Palestinian dichotomy with its power differential.
Okay, and the other problem with your vision, in my opinion, is that you don't know what's next. You don't have a constitution. You gave me an explanation why the Palestinians cannot write a constitution, but you didn't give me an explanation why you cannot write a constitution.
We're just not at that stage yet, but it's easy.
What do you mean you're not at that stage? I mean,
It has
it,
to be a
that
participatory
should be the
process.
first stage.
Now, you don't have some Jew sit down and write a constitution. It's got to
Why
be
not? Why
with a
not?
real group of Palestinian, Israeli, and international legal and political people to write the draft, and then that draft has to be circulated and has to be participatory. And I would want everybody
Good.
possible, all the Palestinians certainly to contribute to it and react to it. It won't get 100% support, of course. That's writing the Constitution itself is a process. It isn't that you write a Constitution and this
Okay,
is it. It's a
but
process,
but
and that's what's wrong with it.
I am questioning Why is it that you have not done it? Everything I look, I
Because the
know about.
Palestinians have not yet, in Arabic, the word is thawabit, your red lines, your parameters. They haven't put forward yet what are their red lines in terms of liberation. What has to go into the Constitution that is non-negotiable, that they absolutely insist on? We could write a constitution that keeps the refugees out. We could write a constitution that says, well, there shouldn't be land reform. We should have the status quo because Israelis are living on the land. You could write bad constitutions. So we have to first get the
And
Palestinian
you get it
input,
corrected.
and then on the basis of the Palestinian input, their thawabit, their non-negotiable demands, then you begin to build around that, and it becomes consensual because the Palestinians have bought into it now. It sees that it addresses their needs. You have to address the Palestinian needs, in my view, before the Israeli needs. The Israelis are the powerful ones, it's true, but they're the ones that have everything. And you're not going to rely on the Israelis to
But
tell the
you said you're
Palestinians
making them
what they.
irrelevant.
So that's why it's a process, and we're not there yet because the Palestinians have not yet been able to come together to give us those kinds of guidelines.
If I had to summarize your vision, I would summarize it by using the word anticipation. You're anticipating the collapse of the apartheid regime.
I'm
You are
struggling for it.
anticipating,
Struggling for it.
I'm sorry?
Not anticipating anything. I'm struggling for it.
Okay, I am talking about my description of your plan. I would say, well, Jeff is anticipating the collapse of the apartheid regime. He is anticipating a constitution. He is anticipating a vision for the future state. But as far as having some concrete action at this time, very little, if
Why?
any.
We have a
Because I
small organization.
because I what is the
Yossi,
beside
you don't take into account, sitting in LA, the immense amount of suppression that Palestinians are working under. Their leadership is dead or in prison. They're scattered. The people in Syria have undergone the civil war there. 350,000 Palestinians in Lebanon are imprisoned for 70 some years in camps that can't even work. Israel and the Palestinian Authority, have impoverished the population, destroyed the school systems. The people are barely surviving. In these conditions, you've got to take into account the
but you're not
condition the
Palestinian. You're not
Palestinians are
under
working under.
occupation.
And even me, I'm a privileged Israeli Jew. I can go out and get in front of bulldozers and nobody will arrest me. But the minute I think we actually declare a one democratic state movement whose goal is to replace Israel with a democratic state, I think I also could be arrested. And people have to make a decision. This isn't some academic exercise, Yossi. People have to make a decision. Are they willing to put their lives on the line? Because seriously, their lives are on the line, the lives of their children. Am I willing to do this? And to tell you the honest truth, not yet. Because the one state idea isn't yet concrete enough, it's true. It hasn't been consolidated enough. There's not enough people behind it yet. The leadership is still lacking for all the reasons we talked about. And at this stage, it's still too vague to commit myself, my my life and my family's life to fighting for. But at some point, when this, like the ANC started as a few people in law office. At some point, as our movement begins to grow and people see it is really just and it's possible and it begins to be organization and strategy and we link up to other forces, then people will begin to say, okay, now it's gotten to the level where I'm willing to die for. And it's not a matter of accepting it. I mean, people are going to die. I mean, this Israel and the Palestinian Authority are zero tolerance, as you can see, zero tolerance authorities, regimes, and people are going to die. And I don't think we're at this place yet, honestly, where people are willing to do that, and that's part of the struggle. That's part of the organization that goes on.
Let me ask you a question. let's assume that in a year from now, we will have an election for a federal government in Israel, Palestine. And we will
Who's
be
we?
able to
Who's
vote
we?
for the people of Israel and Palestine.
But the
The
people of
four
Israel
seated.
aren't going to have an election.
I'm sorry.
The people of Palestine don't accept the federal. They want one
Well,
state.
I'm
They've
not
always
asking.
wanted
I'm
one
not
state.
asking your opinion whether they
Okay,
accept or not. Okay.
all right, let's say
I am just putting a hypothetical in front of you.
if I'm anticipating, I'll allow you to be hypothetical.
Okay. Good. Thank you. So let's assume that in a year from now, there will be an election online in
Okay,
which you residing in Jerusalem will
okay,
be able to vote for a parliament member in
right.
the federal government, and you will also be able to vote for a president of the federal government.
Does this include the 2.5 million Gazans that have to
Yes,
be online
yes,
somehow?
yes,
Okay, all
yes.
right. Once they get electricity.
I'm sorry?
Okay. Once they get electricity to get online, then they can participate.
The election will take place 3 months,
Okay,
and they can vote for 3 months. Okay, you
all
can
right.
vote for 3 months, and the people in Gaza will be able to elect their own parliament members. The people in the West Bank, and the people in Jerusalem, and the people in Tel Aviv, and everywhere in Palestine, Israel, will be able to elect their own parliament member and to
Okay,
elect the president.
all right.
And you are in district number 89 in Jerusalem. There
All right.
are 10 candidates to run for parliament of the federal government
Mhm.
in for the parliament of the federal government,
What
and there
what
are
candidates? People that will stand for the position in the election?
yes,
Or
yes.
who's going to guarantee that they survive the 3 months between the Mukhabarat of the Palestinians and the Shin Bet? Who's going to guarantee once these people put their name forward that they're not killed tomorrow?
Look,
This
let me
Yossi,
ask
I'm
the
telling
question.
you,
Let
the
me ask
idea
the
is
question.
great. The idea
Let
is
me ask
great.
the question, and I understand you want to demean the idea. I understand it, but
I'm not meaning it. I'm simply
yeah, you're asking a question like a typical Israeli asking
it
those
knows
questions.
the political reality here.
Fine.
Yes.
Okay. The political reality is this, that you that I am presenting to you is that there will be an election, and you for the whole area. You are in district, I forgot the number I gave you, let's say 89, and there are 10
Who's
candidates.
initiating the election? Is it
The
Israelis and Palestinians initiating, or who's initiating this?
Our organization, the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, has
Right.
hired international entities that created the districts and created the platform for an election.
But who do you represent? Who gives you the right to do that? Who gives you the mandate to decide on election and the structure and its powers and everything and the Constitution? Who's given you that mandate? If it's a democracy, it has to be the people that do that. You can't just
All right,
have
fine.
someone come in and say this is the way
Okay.
it's going to be. Who
That's a
gave you that?
legitimate
That's why I
question.
asked who's the we.
But that's a legitimate question, okay? Nevertheless, I am asking you the question, okay? There is an election, and the elections will take 3 months. You're in District 89. There are 10 candidates for parliament, and there are 10 candidates for president. You're in District number 89. You have to make a choice, first of all, whether to vote or not, and second of all, to choose one of the members in your district for parliament and one of the members for in your district for president. My question to you is very simple. Will you vote? You will not.
No, because
Okay.
I don't believe in I believe in fighting for a real government that has that has a that has a a state that has state authority, a civil state with equal rights for all its citizens. And this isn't that. This is working within
Why
some,
isn't that? Why isn't it
because
that?
it has no power, it has no state power. It's reinforcing the idea that Israelis and Palestinians are here and there.
The state power will be given to it by the people who are elected.
Wait, in my
They
district,
get the
89,
legitimacy.
is it Jews and Palestinians together in 89? Or is it 89
In
a
your
Jewish?
district, each
Yeah.
district has 47,000 people.
Okay.
In your district, there may be Jews. There may be. You live in Jerusalem, close to Palestinians. There may be Palestinian candidates in your district. There may not be Palestinian.
How many districts are there?
300.
300. Okay. In how many districts is there a Jewish majority of the 300?
I don't know, but
Oh,
let's just.
that's kind of an important thing to know. Because are you going to
Why
create a
is it an
situation?
important thing to know?
Because Israelis have settled the entire country. And
Okay.
it's very, very likely, even if you're in the West Bank in Jericho, it's very likely that in 250 of the 300 districts, you're going to have a Jewish majority. Because that's the way settler colonialism planned it. They have a
Okay.
Jewish
Now
majority
there are
all over.
40. Okay. First of all, in
And
Gaza,
then you replicate the power differential. What have you achieved?
no.
Yeah.
First of all, you don't know that there will be a Jewish majority. Second of all, you don't
Yeah, but you
know
don't
that.
know either, and that's a problem going into this.
I don't know because
You have to know the composition. On what basis did you
But
decide on
look,
300 districts?
you're arguing about something that you don't understand. It makes no difference.
Okay, I'm asking you, on what basis did you decide on these 300 districts? On the basis of what?
The basis of having a parliament members that do not have too much power
Okay.
that representing their district. If you have too much power given to one parliament member, then he would be or she will be heavily influenced. Now,
But
if
who
you
drew the
have
lines? This sounds like a gerrymandered system. Who drew the
no,
lines?
it's not gerrymandering.
Who drew the lines?
Okay, look, let me tell you why it's not gerrymandering. Because in order to pass legislation, you need 55% of the Israeli parliament members and 55% of the Palestinian parliament members to
And you're
vote.
replicating the sides again. And like there's a fake equality. How can you put together settlers that have come to take over a country and are committing genocide and
Uh-huh.
claim exclusive claim to the country as together with the indigenous population that's resisting them, and pretend that in the parliament that you're reinforcing the idea of two sides again?
No,
Rather than two peoples that live together in a common civil state, you're simply giving another form to apartheid.
as far as
Giving
voting,
another form to apartheid.
no, Jeff. As far as voting, as far as voting, it makes no difference whether you are Jewish, Palestinian, Muslim, Christian.
Yeah.
Everyone has the same right to vote. Okay. As far as being elected, a Palestinian can vote for Israeli, and Israeli can
That's right.
elect can now. It's true that at the end of the day, there will be so many Palestinian parliament members and so many Israeli parliament members.
There'll be more Israeli. There have to
Fine.
be.
Okay. Fine.
The way it's set. Okay. Okay.
You don't really know that, and I don't know that. You don't know who they'll vote
But
for.
you don't know, you should know. Because you
I
should
cannot
know
know.
the
How would I know?
No, you
How
should
would I
know the
know? How
demographic
you don't
composition
even?
of every district. Otherwise, you're going to
How
set up
would
a
I know?
situation
Look,
where 250 districts or 230 districts
it's
are
not a
Jewish.
rigged system. You're telling
It
me
is
I should
rigged.
know.
It
You
is
want it
rigged.
to be a rigged system.
But it has to,
It's
but
not a
you don't
rigged
know if it's
system.
rigged
How
or
can I
not
know?
because you don't know the composition demographically of each district. So you have no idea
Look,
whether it's rigged or not.
look, you're refusing to understand and you're making arguments without understanding what it's about. Okay? It's not a rigged system. It's
Why?
not a rigged system. So
Why?
I don't know who is
You
going to
don't
be
know that.
elected.
You don't know that. You don't know
Of
that
course,
because you don't know how many of
it's a democracy
the
with a.
majority. You don't know that if it's rigged or not. That's what
I,
gerrymandering is.
I know
Create
it's not
more
rigged
districts
because
to
I
have
don't know. Look,
Republicans and
Jeff,
Democrats.
you're
You don't know
refusing to
what
understand.
gerrymandering means, I think.
I know what gerrymandering means.
If I create a Republican majority district in this weird way, it doesn't mean the Republicans can't vote Democratic. We just know that they're not going to vote Democratic, and that's why the gerrymandering works.
Okay,
You
look.
can't tell me that I don't know how many Jews or how many Palestinians are in each district, but it doesn't matter because they can all vote for everybody else anyway.
No, that's not what I'm saying. You are purposely misrepresenting what I am telling you in order to diminish the idea. You are purposely
I'm saying this
misrepresenting.
out of respect. I
You're
respect
refusing to
your.
understand it. You are
Okay.
refusing to understand it in order to diminish the idea.
Okay. So why?
By the
What?
way, you participated in the simulation and you praised it.
I look. I think every effort. And I really respect what you're doing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not. I just don't think it's the right approach. But I mean,
Well,
that's
you
why you
don't
invited
understand
me.
it. You don't.
You didn't
You're
invite me to
refusing.
support your. You knew where I'm coming from. But
No,
at
I
any
know.
rate, okay. I do. But I'll shut up. Give me the. All right.
Okay. So
What I refuse to understand.
you're refusing to understand that the districts are 300 districts, 47,000 people in each district. Okay? So if you have 47,000 people in each district, let's say you start from Gaza. Gaza, with 2.5 million people, will have approximately 40 districts. Okay?
Yeah, except all the districts in northern Gaza you can erase because Palestinians will never be allowed back into northern Gaza. So
It
take
doesn't
those
matter.
out of your election.
It doesn't matter. They will have 40 districts. They will have 40 parliament members. Okay? The Palestinians in the West Bank that are 3 million,
Okay.
some of them live with Israelis. Okay? There are about
No,
750.
no, they live under Israelis. They don't live with Israelis.
I'm talking
Don't tell
about.
me the Kiryat Arbor settlement lives together with the farmers
No,
around.
you are
Why do they together, Yossi?
you're purposely misconstruing what I am saying. They live with Israelis
No,
right next to each other.
they don't
Jeff.
live with Israelis. They're controlled by Israelis. Their lands are taken by.
But I
They're
am
the
not talking
victims of
about the
the.
Israeli
You're
system.
presenting them like they're neighbors
I
in
am not
Riverside.
representing that they are neighbors. If I say that I live with you, it doesn't mean that we have great relationship.
They're not
It
living.
means that we are physically next to each other.
Okay,
Okay?
okay,
So there are 3.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank living with Israelis. I didn't say they live together good. I didn't say they are equal. You're making it up in order to miscommunicate what the federal system. They are not. I didn't say they are living
you're.
over or under. I said they live with.
Ask your listeners what living with means, and you'll see my problem. But
Okay.
okay, never mind.
All right. Next to. Okay.
Okay, okay,
They will have the 3.5
okay,
million Palestinians and the 700
right.
um, Israelis, together 4.25 million. They will have, I can't calculate right now how many, if you divide 4.5 million by 47, let's assume another 50
Right.
parliament members. Okay.
750,000 settlers. Okay. Yeah.
1,000 Palestinians, Israelis with 300, with 3 million or 3.5 million Palestinians. Okay. the people in Israel, some of them are Jews, some of them are Christians, some of them are Muslims.
Yeah.
All of them will have their district, and you in district number 89 will also live in with Israelis, with Palestinians. It really makes no difference.
It makes a big difference. What are you talking about? It makes no difference.
It makes no difference because you will be able to elect a Palestinian. You will be able to vote for a Palestinian. Now, it may be that in your particular district, there is a minority of Palestinians.
But it makes a difference who I'm electing.
Correct.
Right? So the vast majority of people in this parliament could be Jewish, since they'll be the majority in most of the districts, right?
They could be Palestinians and they could be Israelis. Okay. But at the end of the day, in order for them to pass legislation, you will need a 55% of the Israeli parliament members, even if there are 170 Israeli parliament members and 130 Palestinian, or the other way around, you need 55% of the Palestinian and 55% of the Israeli parliament members to vote yes on the legislation.
But wait a minute, we're missing half the Palestinian population. Where are the refugees? Where are the refugees in this whole thing? The refugees are half the Palestinian population.
The refugees outside Israel-Palestine?
Oh, the refugees are a part of the Palestinian people, an integral part.
You're asking me where are they?
Expelled and have a right to be in the country and counted. There cannot be an election that Palestinians will participate in that does not include the refugees. You're not going to drive a wedge between Palestinians inside this colonial regime.
Why can't
Palestinians that regime drove out? You can't do that. You've got to include the refugees. Otherwise,
wait. Does the Israeli government have elections that includes Israelis that reside outside or Jews that reside outside?
But the Jews outside are not the refugees. Nobody drove the Jews out of the country. These are Palestinians from Palestine that have been driven out and have a right to return, and they're an integral part of the Palestinian people, and you will not drive a wedge between them. The Palestinians inside and outside means nothing to the Palestinians. They're the same families.
So now you're bringing a new objection.
Exactly. No, it's not an objection. It's the right consideration. You're talking about the Palestinian people and the Israeli Jewish peoples coming together. You can't base it on citizenship or the country is the result of a colonial process in which half the Palestinians have been driven out. You can't build a just society on the basis of a state that was defined and created by a colonial regime that's genocidal towards the people that you want to have elected in your elections. Palestinians will say, you know what? I'm not going to do it anyway, but if I was going to be in elections, I'll only be if my cousin in the camps in Jordan can vote as well. Why do I have a right to vote and he doesn't? Because the Zionists decided that I'm part of their state? Not really, but I'm part of the country that they've controlled and he isn't. You're letting the Zionists decide who these districts are, who has the right to vote, who makes decisions, and you're cutting out half the Palestinian population.
Well, the PA had an election and did not include the Palestinians.
That's right, because it was created by Israel. The PA.
Yeah, but the Palestinians
created by the Palestinians.
I know, but the Palestinians voted.
They didn't vote.
The Palestinians voted.
Very few voted. And
they voted.
See, the PA doesn't have the support of 80% of the Palestinians.
You can create your own facts. You can have an opinion, but you cannot run away from the facts. The Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza voted, while the Palestinians in Jordan, Syria, all over the world were excluded from voting.
I know, and that was why. That's why the PA
theory has totally collapsed.
No. But that was at a point. That was at a point when they thought maybe the PA was on the way towards a Palestinian state, towards a two-state thing. There were a couple of elections, but finally, first of all, there haven't been elections for the last
Look, your
20.
theory totally collapsed now.
No,
Okay,
no.
your objection totally
The fact that
collapsed
they
because
voted.
you said
All
your
right.
argument was Palestinians will not agree to have Palestinians outside not included in the process. And now I showed you that they agreed, and you said, "Well, that was
No,
then.
you're
Now
talking
it's going
about
to be different."
no. The
It doesn't
PA
work
was
that way.
no. The PA was for the West Bank and Gaza,
Right.
right? First of
Right.
all, not Jerusalem, not East Jerusalem. They couldn't vote in East Jerusalem. Second of all, your parliament represents all of the country.
Correct.
So it's a different thing what you're talking about. You're talking about a parliament that represents all the people of historic Palestine.
Hmm.
Now, if I'm a Palestinian, I would say the people of
But you're
historic
not a
Palestine
Palestinian. You
are
said
not
you're not a
defined in
Palestinian.
historic Palestine. They
Look,
include
Jeff,
Mike
Jeff,
doesn't historic. They
you can't
include half
choose
the
to be a
Palestine.
Palestinian when you want to, and
No,
Israeli when you
no,
want to. You got to
no,
decide. I
no,
asked
because
you
the
why didn't
PA
you
was
write a
defined.
constitution? You said it's up to the Palestinians, and now you're saying I am a Palestinian when it comes to voting.
No, you're doing that. The PA was not a countrywide regime they were voting. They were voting
Okay.
specifically for a very localized regime in the West Bank and Gaza. Your thing is more ambitious and it's actually great. It's a good idea. Have a parliament for the entire country. But you can't define the country by the Zionist enterprise. You've got to
Who
define the country by the people that are inhabitants of that country, and that includes the refugees. You set that up once you wanted a
you have
parliament
a
for the whole
rolling objection. You come up
you
with
have
new
to
objections
include
all the time.
Yossi, you can't have elections for the whole country and exclude half their population. The
Okay.
Palestinians
Why not?
refugees are,
Okay.
are a part of the people of
The Palestinians have done that. The Israelis have done that. The Israelis excluded
no,
the Palestinians
that's right.
from election. They expelled the Palestinians
Okay.
and excluded them from
Okay.
voting.
So you want to continue that process and exclude half the
No,
Palestinians?
and you yourself participated in the Israeli election. Okay, and the Palestinians also excluded the Palestinians that are outside,
Okay.
including Hamas excluded.
Okay.
Now that
So with
there
those
is, wait,
precedences, you
let
can
me
include
finish.
half the
Let me
Palestinians. Okay.
that we're saying, well, let's create a federal government. This is not a Palestinian government. It's not an Israeli government. It's a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine. You say, well, no, no, no. You must have the Palestinians that have never been permitted to vote before. Now, for the purpose
They're the
of
people of
possibly
Palestine.
making peace, we need. So, what you want
Just
is
because they've been denied the right to vote doesn't mean they're not the people of Palestine.
I didn't say they're not
Talking
the
about the
people of it.
people of
But
Israel and the people of Palestine.
you're saying there cannot be a federal government. The people of Israel and Palestine cannot create a federal government
That's right.
unless everyone is included.
All
While
the
I showed
inhabitants
you
of
that
Palestine, all the Jews and all the Palestinians and all all the Palestinians of Palestine include the refugees. They are not excluded in
okay,
any circumstance.
and I showed you that the Palestinian
Let's move on.
governments. Okay, and all right, okay, all right. Let's move on. I'm not sure where to move to, but my question to you is now that you mentioned creating a secular government, or
Right.
I'm sorry, a one democratic government,
A sec
is
non
the one democratic government that you are thinking of includes all the Palestinians
of course.
that are outside Palestine.
But the right of
Okay.
return is crucial to any
No,
solution.
not the right of return, but before that, the right to vote, and the
If
Constitution
you're
includes.
you want elections that all the people of the Palestinian people participate in, you can't define them by Zionist borders. that
I
divided
didn't
them.
say that. You
No,
were saying
that's all I'm saying is
I
yes.
didn't
I
say that.
I
I
think
didn't
all the
say
Palestinian people
I
agree.
never mentioned Zionist borders. You're mentioning
What
Zionist
makes the
borders.
distinction between a Palestinian inside and a Palestinian outside, so called? The Zionist borders. Otherwise, they'd all be inside.
Okay, but
So
I
you
didn't
can't,
mention.
can't take that as a
All
basis for
all
your
right, let me
election.
ask you this: are you saying that the people of Israel and Palestine cannot reach an agreement together to have a common federal government unless the Palestinians outside are included in that agreement? Is that
Yes,
what you're saying?
yes.
Okay.
Because this
Well,
settler
okay.
colonialism is between peoples. It's not between citizens. It's not between states. It's between the Jewish Zionist people want to replace the Palestinian people. We're talking about a war of peoples.
All
That's
right.
why you have genocide. So if we're
Okay.
talking about peoples, then the Palestinian people, half of them, include the refugees.
All right. So why are you voting in Israeli elections that precludes Palestinians
Right.
from Palestine and preclude Palestinians that are outside Palestine?
For the same reasons Palestinians voted for the PA. There's no choice.
But
In the
doesn't
meantime,
that make
that's
you a
what you have,
hypocrite?
and you work with what you have. But I'm not going to put in
Exactly.
place new systems
Exactly. You
that
work with what
reinforce
you
the old.
have. In other words, perfection is the enemy of good. And that's
No,
what we
you're
are.
putting in
We are
place.
working with what we have. You can't have it both ways, Jeff. You
I don't have.
say you work with what you have, but
That's right.
you also say let's wait for something else to be created. You
No,
don't work with
no, I'm not saying wait. Let's struggle for something else. But in the meantime, you don't put in place new structures that simply reinforce the old system. Why
eating
would you
well and
put in place a
exercise.
new parliament that reinforces the idea of a dichotomy between Jews and Palestinians on the one hand, if we're all living in the same country, and you don't have a concept of citizenship? Because there's Jews here and there's Arabs here, and every decision has to be this many Jews and this many Arabs. That's not citizenship. That's not equal right. That's not a civil state. And then you create a
Why is
situation
it
where the Jews structurally have more power than the
why is
Palestinians.
it okay? Why
So
is it
that's a
not?
new structure that's destructive. It isn't a constructive structure.
Look, look,
That's why
look,
I'm against
look.
it.
You are an American citizen. Okay, you believe in the American federal system. The American federal system. I'm sorry.
I don't know if I believe in it.
Well, you did not renounce your American citizenship.
I don't. It's there.
Okay.
Just
The
after.
American citizenship, the American system created a system to deal with reality. The reality is that you have 50 states,
That's right.
and those 50 states have vastly different population,
That's
vastly different
right.
economic power.
That's
But in order to create a federal system for everyone, they found a system that is not totally perfect, but
exactly.
it's a perfect to work with reality. That's
They
why they.
they did it, not somebody else. They wrote the Constitution, not
Okay.
some guy sitting in England that wrote their Constitution
So
for them.
that's the problem where
They
the
wrote it.
person.
Yes. You don't have a buy-in of the local population on this plan of yours. You don't have. You
So
don't have
the bottom line is where I reside.
creating a system without the participation of the people living here.
That's not true. That's
Why?
not
Why?
that's because
Israelis don't accept your idea.
we have been working on this for 20 some years. We have
Okay.
conducted many meetings, many simulations. We
No.
presented the Constitution.
I've been in them. Yes.
You said in them, okay. We dealt with issues in the Constitution. It's not that. So the bottom line, your problem is where I personally sit. That's your issue.
No. My issue is the whole system you're trying to create was not a product of the people living here creating it, or a critical mass of them.
That's
It's, yes,
not true.
a group
That's
outside
not true.
that
Not
maybe
only
in consultation with a few other people, but basically it's not a project that's coming from within the peoples of Israel, Palestine.
look, come to our simulation. You will see people. We've conducted
I don't care.
many. What else do you
If
want?
you
What
go, if
else
you
do you
went out
want?
today into the streets of of Jerusalem, the Jewish side, and said, "How many of you know the Israel-Palestine, federation idea? How many do you
Right.
think would know what it is?
Very
If you go
little.
to the east side and talk to Palestinians, how do you? I mean, let's be honest.
Very little. I
You
agree
have to
with you.
you
Uh,
have to build support
okay.
before you
Do,
can
do
go
you
into the
do
elections
you
of
know
Israel.
who wrote the American Constitution?
Americans.
How many?
No, it's not everybody writes the Constitution, but it was
How
accepted
many?
by a
Okay. Okay.
constitutional
I'll tell you. Well,
of
okay.
representatives.
I'll tell you how many. One person wrote the Constitution. Okay. No, no, he did it in consultation. He did it with meeting. How many Americans do you
It
think?
was approved by what? By an assembly of
Right.
representatives.
Yes, and that's what we are looking for is to have ratification of the Constitution. And by the way, the Constitution could be changed. It could be, but you have to start somewhere. You
But you
have
have
to
to start
write.
with the people themselves. You don't start. Okay, all right, never.
What do you mean you don't start? There is one way to cut a a chicken. If it's written, deal with it, change it, and don't criticize the physical location of the person who wrote it.
But of course you do. You'll see. In this
Why?
post-colonial age, we're beyond the time when people abroad tell other peoples what their constitution is and how they're going to vote and what district they're living in. That does not work after the in the post-colonial time. That what was all the colonial struggles about? That people have control of their own fates, their own destinies, their own countries, their own peoples.
So the
I mean,
people,
you have a wonderful idea. I have a great idea of how Nigeria should reform its terrible political system. I really, I've cited. I have a good idea, but who the hell am I to go tell the Nigerians what to do?
but
That's
Jeff,
with all the faults. That's their decision, and it has to come
Jeff,
from them.
didn't you say that you support what do you call it,
What, BDS?
BDS?
Okay,
Where did
yeah,
that idea come from?
the Palestinians. The
Where?
BDS
Where do they?
office in Ramallah.
No, the BDS
BDS
movement.
National Committee office is in Ramallah. I
The,
mean,
the,
I was a part of it. I helped formulate it. It's true. But I have that legitimacy in the sense that I live here and that I was invited in by the
all right,
oppressed. The
all right.
oppressed invited me to be a part of that process. I would never have come to the Palestinians and said, hey, we should do BDS.
Look,
You can't, you've got to be invited
let me
in. You have to have that trust. You have to build, and that's part of the struggle, Yossi. You
let me
have
let
to
me let me
build the base, and that takes time. There's no shortcuts. You're accusing me of a far-fetched long-range idea. I'm saying to you, you can't shortcut this. You can't have elections in a year. There are processes that have to be in place, and
let me just respond
otherwise,
to
it's not
the.
legitimate. It's not legitimate.
All right, let me just respond first of all to the question of me writing the Constitution. Okay, first of all, I was born in Israel. I lived in Israel for 21 years. I went through the Israeli educational system. I went through the Israeli military.
So why should
I
Palestinians accept that? Some guy in the Israeli military writes the
no no
Constitution
no,
for
no
Palestinians.
let me just a Palestinian and an Israeli should not accept or reject this constitution because of who wrote it. A Palestinian or where he lives, a Palestinian or Israeli should reject or accept the Constitution on its merit. The location of the person who wrote it, even if I was a plumber in
Yeah.
Afghanistan, who wrote a good constitution, if you are truly interested in peace, you should take that into consideration. You should not reject the Constitution because the person who wrote it you don't like or he
But it
lives
doesn't.
somewhere
But it
else.
doesn't reflect the need. It doesn't come from the people themselves. It's coming from a good
Let's
intentioned person.
assume. Let's assume.
What
Let's
what are
assume.
the Palestinian thawabit? What do they need for their liberation? Is that built into the Constitution somewhere? Can you give me an example of red lines that Palestinians would have in any constitution? You can't,
Yeah,
because you haven't really consulted the Palestinians about it.
yeah. The
You want them to
Constitution.
accept it or reject it with amendments. That's not the way
The
it works.
Constitution. That's the Constitution does not spells any substantive policies for the people of Israel or Palestine.
So what
None.
does it do? So what does it do?
It creates a system of government. Okay, a
Okay.
system of government for the people of Israel and Palestine,
Well,
not
then it's not a constitution.
is the U.S.
Organization. It's an
Constitution.
organizational plan. It's not a constitution. Constitution embodies the laws, the essential law. That's what the legal system is based on. It's a constitution,
All right,
not an
you can call it.
organization.
You can deny that it's a constitution.
No,
Fine,
you're telling me
call
it's
it.
not.
I call it a constitution. I read many constitutions.
Right.
In my opinion, a constitution is about a system of government, not about
Right.
substantive policies. Okay, if it says everyone is equal, everyone is entitled to equality,
Right.
that's part of the system of government. In other words, it
Okay.
cannot pass legislation that violates the equality clause. If it
Okay.
says no search or seizure without probable cause, that's part of the system of government. It doesn't, the Constitution basically sets guidelines for how the government will function, how the Supreme Court will make its decisions. What are
What are your constitutional guidelines? What are yours in your constitution?
Sure, there are three branches of government.
No, no, not the organization. Not the organization. What you're talking about now, the concept, the legal framework, the principles. Equality under the law, for example,
Yes.
or search and seizure. What are those in your constitution?
Let me bring it. Hold on a second.
In the meantime, can I talk to your audience? Look, everybody, I really do respect Yossi. I've known him for years, and I respect every good intentioned plan to move this forward. I really do. I mean, I'm saying it sincerely. But again, there has to be a participatory, and it has to really resolve the problem, which is settler colonialism, in my view, Zionism.
Okay. The people of Palestine and Israel, in order to bring about peace and prosperity, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility,
Okay.
promote the general welfare, and secure liberty for ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this constitution for the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. The
Okay.
Israeli-Palestinian Confederation serves as a government of the people to resolve conflicts and grow into the future in a fair and equitable manner. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to live at peace and enjoy liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and self-determination. We believe in that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. We believe that the creation of a confederation is consistent with the aspirations of the people of Palestine and Israel. The
Not
Israeli
Palestine. Not Palestine, because they wouldn't accept the Israeli part of the Confederation. Why would they legitimize a settler colonial part of the Confederation?
We believe that the creation of a confederation is consistent with the aspiration of the people of Palestine and Israel.
The aspiration of the people of Palestine is liberation. That's
Okay,
their aspiration.
all right. I mean,
Liberation, again, legitimizes and gives a place and power to the colonial settlers, to the Zionists in this system. That's the last thing the Palestinians would want.
what's wrong with that line? We believe that creation of a confederation is consistent with the aspiration of the people of Palestine and Israel. I don't understand what you're saying, Jeff.
Because the aspiration of the people of Palestine is that Palestine become Palestine, and that
Okay.
their national rights are are restored, and the refugees come back, and it's a very different vision.
It doesn't say
It's not
that
a vision that legitimizes Israelis.
it doesn't say that the
Israelis for
Palestinians and the Israelis
Palestinians
have the
are
same vision. It doesn't say. It says that the
no
Palestinians have the
aspirations. Aspirations.
right. It doesn't
It's,
say that the
it's the
Israelis.
aspirations of neither people. The Palestinian people's aspirations are liberation within Palestine, self determination, and then living together with equal rights with Israeli Jews. The Israeli aspiration is to transform Palestine into Israel, which is doing aggressively. So the
Okay. Look,
Confederation, in fact,
it doesn't. It doesn't.
doesn't represent the aspirations of either people. You
Look.
can say it does. That's why I'm saying from the outside it's not legitimate, because you can assert that that is the aspiration, but you can't impose that on
It
people.
doesn't
They
say
have
that.
to tell you,
You're making stuff up.
Yossi, they have to tell you what their aspirations are. You don't tell them. And neither Israelis nor Palestinians share the aspirations of a confederation. None of them do. None of them do. I'm telling you.
Look, once we have the election, once we elect a parliament members,
No.
those parliament members who will be elected, if they accept the Constitution, they will be
Why should they accept the Constitution?
because they
Why?
agree
It's not their
because
Constitution.
they agree to these guidelines.
All right.
They agree to the Constitution. Are you
But
saying that
the
all
Constitution.
Palestinians and all Israelis?
Agree to the Constitution.
Look,
Because what you
you
just
are
read, they don't
assuming
agree. They don't
you're
agree to it. You can assert whatever you want to assert. Palestinian and Israeli peoples do not agree with what you wrote. They don't
there
agree
are
to it.
14.5 million people there. You're representing 14.5 million
Oh,
people.
I know I can give you polls. I know what the
I am
Israeli
not
people
saying
want.
I'm not talking
And they
about
don't want
polls.
a confederation. And I know what the
Look,
Palestinian people want, and they don't want it. I have never heard an Israeli, except five people, like, or, these different confederation people. I've never heard Israelis or Palestinians talk about confederation.
Jeff, what you
That's not what they want. If anything, the only thing they could agree on eventually is one democratic state. That's the only thing they could ever agree on,
Jeff,
because
what
that
you
decolonizes, that removes all the structures of domination and control that you build them in. You build in a system of districts in which you're going to have a majority of Jewish delegates in your parliament.
no, you're
That's the
misrepresenting.
opposite of
You are totally
decolonization.
misrepresenting. You are
No,
creating your own
no, because
facts
the
and then you
Palestinian
are
population.
misrepresenting them as
No,
if I said them. I'm
no, you're
sorry.
assuming in your districts that somehow there's an even distribution of Israeli Jews and Palestinians, and so from the 47,000, there'll be this and this. No, the Zionists over the last
You're
century,
not
wait a
making
minute,
sense to
have
what you're.
confined the Palestinians to 15% of the land. So 15% of your districts, Area A, Area B, East Jerusalem, Gaza, whatever exists of that, and the Palestinian citizens of Israel are confined to 3.5% of the land of Israel. So 15% altogether. You're also all your districts are going to have a 15% Palestinian majority. And they're going to have an
You are
85% Jewish
totally,
majority, because that's the way the
misrepresenting.
population is
You
distributed.
are totally misrepresenting the idea. You're totally
No,
misrepresenting the
you're
formula.
misunderstanding the idea of equal.
Look, Jeff, yeah, you're totally misrepresenting. I don't really see a point in continuing the conversation because I don't think we are, we are on the same page. I think you are totally misrepresenting the idea. I don't know if you have a personal issue
I
that
do. I do have a person. I'm not a personal. I love you, Yossi. It's not personal. I have a political issue. And that is, I don't want to see any political program put into place that's going to interfere with the struggle to decolonize Palestine and create one civil state for everybody. I don't want any obstacles in the way. I don't want any misconceptions, any other diversions. You're right. I have an agenda, and I'm against those kinds of initiatives, even though they're well intentioned. Personally, I
Okay,
appreciate
so
what you're doing,
so
and I
so
respect
your idea is there has to be a collapse, and you do not want anything to interfere with the collapse.
without a collapse, you can't decolonize.
Well,
You
there
can't
has to be a
decolonize.
collapse of the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments,
That's right.
and you're waiting for that collapse to happen in order to.
I'm waiting, Yossi. I'm struggling for it. I'm
You're
organizing
struggling.
for it.
You're
I'm
struggling.
planning for it. I'm working
Okay,
for it.
all right.
And
You're
I've got
struggling.
millions of people in the streets of the world that support it. I mean, we're not
Okay,
starting from zero here, but
okay.
it's a difficult struggle for all the reasons. And
You're
I don't want to put in place things that are going to interfere with that process. That's all, or
so
deflect
you
that process.
Yeah. So you are struggling in order to make that collapse happen, and you do not want any formulas or ideas
A
that would
deflection.
interfere. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. But at the same time, you do not have a vision of what will happen after the collapse.
No, I have a whole 10.1 state solution. No, we have a very
But no,
detailed, we
but
didn't talk
10
about it
point,
tonight.
a constitution
We
is
have a
not
very
10.
detailed political program of what
Okay.
we want.
But you don't have a constitution.
Not yet. No, because we have a different idea of the processes by which constitutions are.
Okay, look, I
So
think that this
thanks
conversation
for having
between
me.
us is excellent. I enjoyed it.
All right.
I enjoyed the conversation very much. I think that it clarifies finally in an honest way by us arguing with each other. What is the difference? What is the?
Yeah, no, that's right.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it should stay between the two of us. I'm not sure this is something you want to, maybe just leave it between the two of us or something and
No,
not,
I'm
not
gonna
broad.
I'm gonna disseminate this. I mean, we have to. That's part of the. And
Yeah, but nobody would know if you didn't. Between ourselves.
no, it's gonna
Well,
go.
because I don't want the wrong impression that I don't respect what you're doing. I don't accept the idea, which is legitimate. I don't have to. But at the
No,
same time, I do respect the intention and the initiative and the work you've put into this. And I want that to come through. I don't want any feeling that I don't personally or politically respect what you're doing or this initiative, which I do respect. I simply don't agree with it, but I respect.
all right. Okay. But you understand this is a podcast. It's gonna go I'm gonna distribute it.
It's your decision.
All
I'm
right.
happy with it.
All right. I think
Okay,
it's gonna be very interesting conversation for people to follow.
hopefully there'll be a follow up if you'd like.
Yes,
I
yes,
mean, not
hopefully.
only between the two of us, but with others involved as well.
Yes. That's my intention. Yeah, I invite other people and but yeah, I enjoy the conversation, Jeff. All right.
Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Okay,
Be well.
bye bye.
Bye.